now.
This is Cindy Spiljarek. I'd like to open the October 8th meeting of the American Rescue Plan Committee. It's 2 o'clock, and if we could note the presence of a quorum. Let's start. Troy Patton, are you on the phone?
I'm here.
Okay. And Scott Willis?
I'm here.
And Misha Farrar, or who is in her stead, it's Carrie Gagnon.
Yes, I'm here.
Okay. John Rogers?
I'm here.
Okay, John is here, and myself, Cindy Spiljarek. So first thing we'll do is approve the minutes from our last meeting, which was September 10th. I'm hoping everyone had a chance to review it. Thank you, Scott, for drafting these. So is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Motion
Second.
and a second. All those in favor?
Aye. Aye.
You know, to be official, because of the new requirements, we should probably do a voice vote on that just to be safe. So how about we do
Okay.
that? Okay, Troy?
Yes.
Scott?
Yes.
Carrie?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
And myself, yes. Okay, the minutes have been approved. And now we'll go on to new business. Our items of business, I should say. And that first one is our appropriation ordinance, which will be at council for introduction this Monday, hopefully. It is not officially on the agenda yet, but will be hopefully this afternoon. And has everyone had a chance to review this?
Yes.
The final pages will need to be amended to conform with our normal ordinances, so we will do that. But the meat of it is there. And since, Dustin, you helped draft that, could you speak to it, please?
Happy to. Cindy, I assume everybody can hear me. I'm Dustin Meeks, Jake German's minion from the last meeting. Jake had a baby, and so we're very happy for him, but he couldn't be here today, and he's sorry that he is missing it. So the ordinance, essentially what it does is two things, right? So the city has created the American Rescue Plan Committee, and this ordinance sort of gives the committee the go-ahead to create a plan for presentation to the city council at a later date, and it establishes a model for that plan. So if you look at Exhibit A to the document, that is going to be a model American Rescue Plan Act plan that essentially the city council will have blessed as sort of, go ahead and fill this in with the things that the committee believes we should use the American Rescue Plan Act funds for. So there's a lot of blanks in the exhibit, and there's a lot of sort of very general language, right? But like that's just because all of the items in that are to be determined. So Exhibit A is just the model plan that's been sort of blessed, and you can go forward and fill that in. What it also does is it appropriates the American Rescue Plan Act funds that the city of Westfield has received in its first tranche of funding this year to the purposes of the projects that will be in the plan, insofar as those are eligible under the American Rescue Plan Act. And we won't let you put anything in the plan that isn't eligible. So so if it's in the plan, it should be good. And essentially, so it does those two things. And the language at the beginning is sort of the very standard additional appropriation language that you probably have seen a million times as you've appropriated for various projects in the city's history. So I'm happy to answer any questions that anybody has.
to be clear, we are not basically cutting checks right yet. I
No.
mean, we have to finalize our plan and how we want to spend that, and that will change over time, is what we've talked about. I mean, given the needs, given guidance, all these things. And so I don't want people thinking that we're now ready to go to cut checks for different
Right.
projects. We're not that far yet.
Right, this will just put the money, essentially, so that once the city council has approved projects, it can go through sort of the normal spending process, right? The money will be there, and it will already, these things will, the plan will be, what goes in the plan, the money will be available to pull for that later, yes. But we're not spending any money today, we're just sort of putting the money in it can be spent, and then the projects will fill themselves in as we go along, but.
And one question I had for you on that is, it didn't specifically say in here that the consulting fees, while we know that they are eligible, it wasn't specifically in this model.
Right.
So do we need additional language to rectify that?
So it's something that we can add to the ARP plan later, into the model. We can add a new section into it specifically related to consulting fees. Another consideration that we're probably going to have to add a paragraph to, and this was in the last day or so that we've found this from. So the State Board of Accounts has told municipal units, sort of put out a notice to municipal units around the state that you should reserve 10% of your American Rescue Plan Act funds for the cost of audits by the State Board of Accounts, and there has been a lot of consternation about that around the state. 10% is a fairly large amount of money, but
That's huge.
that's right now what SBOA is recommending.
Yeah, that would be a sizable amount for our distribution.
Right, almost with $490,000 or $490,000, essentially set aside for audit purposes out of the first tranche. Which is, I would be impressed if SBOA can find that much audit costs for the city of Westfield.
Especially just given the nature of how this will work. That's
Yeah.
not like a whole city, but,
Yeah,
you know.
so,
Okay.
but that is what they sort of put out in their pronouncement, and so, whether or not that will continue to be their opinion, considering the amount of pushback that has sort of come from folks about that, we'll see, but for the moment, they're recommending 10%. So essentially just plan on 4.4 million for projects for the moment, assuming that SBOA sticks to, they want you to hold back 490,000 to pay them to audit things later.
Okay.
Would we need to do that again for the second allotment as well?
If that's still SBOA's policy, then yes, I would
That's almost
presume so.
$1 million.
It is a lot of money. Who would have thought that government employees cost that much an hour? But in any case, that's what they've recommended.
Okay.
And we're figuring out why they have recommended that, and whether or not they'll stick to that is, I think, open to question.
Maybe for smaller communities that received a lot smaller tranche, then maybe that
Right.
is appropriate or something.
Right,
but-
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Does anyone have any questions about either the model template or the appropriation ordinance?
No.
Not for mine.
No comments? Everyone's had a chance to look at it, and they're okay with it being forwarded to council for approval Monday?
Correct, yes. Do we need
Yeah,
to suspend the rules? Is there a timeline? Do we need to have urgency around this, or can it just go through the normal process?
I don't think that there's any reason you wouldn't need to pass it in one meeting. You can, but
I'd rather not if we
there's
don't
no
have to.
No,
reason. necessarily.
let's have our introduction then Monday, and we'll schedule it for the public hearing at the following meeting from there,
Yep.
and maybe consider it at that point then.
Yep.
Okay. Well, that sounds fantastic then. That was pretty easy. Again, this will be updated as we go along. I mean, in terms of the investment plan, this is just a guide to provide us what we need to do in establishing our plan. So, I don't think, do we need to take official vote on sending this to council then for approval?
I don't know, do we?
I would say that Westfield is taking a very formal approach to ARP planning, which is laudable. A lot of communities, every community is taking a different approach to this. So if the committee wants to sort of make that formal recommendation, I think that's fine. And if you don't, I think that's fine. Either one of those is probably fine.
Let's
Yeah.
take a vote on it,
Okay.
just so we have that committee action and it's for our records.
We don't want to have to
then.
come back and do this again if attorneys don't agree with what we've done. So let's just be safe and get it done.
That's true. Okay, so do we have a motion to forward ordinance number 212848 to the council for their consideration?
Yeah, this is Troy, I'll make a motion to send to council.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second, so let's do our voice vote. Troy?
Yes.
Scott?
Yes.
Carrie?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
And myself, yes. All right, so that will be forwarded to council for their consideration. Okay. So I was hoping that we could go through and discuss this model plan investment, that is the Exhibit A, in terms of understanding how we want to approach that from our specific jurisdiction. So, as you know, we have not had a big public push yet for input. And so, right now, we're going on a few basic ideas from requests that we've had, with knowns coming forward in their requests. And we do need to decide, at least in my opinion, we can discuss this, with these different categories, the approximate buckets, if you will, what would be appropriate to look at spending. I mean, in general, we should have an idea, do we want to spend 80% on infrastructure? Do we want to spend 40% on nonprofits and business help? Again, that discussion on how do we divvy up these funds, and again, keeping in mind, having it be the most transformative, if you will, possibility. And that's the thing, there is, of course, a lot of need everywhere, but what's going to have the biggest bang for the buck? What doesn't have funding, other funding sources? Or, what has been suffering the most, that has the most ability to make, I guess, long-term significant future change? And again, it all has to come back to responding to the pandemic. So, I don't want to keep talking this whole time, but
Doing
Scott,
good.
do you want to talk about some of your ideas?
So there's really kind of 5 buckets from what I can gather that we can really put this money into. For me personally, the one bucket of giving it to private businesses is not something I'm overly excited about, primarily because there was programs out there for that. And if you've survived to where we're at today, you're probably okay. So for me, that's not something I'm excited about, but if, you and Troy see it otherwise, I'm certainly open to conversation around it. I do believe infrastructure should be a priority for us. What little we can use for it, we should. But I would caution us going after infrastructure projects that we already have a funding source for. So we have talked a little bit about the fire headquarters, and there's probably some things we can slice off there. I'm not sure, I don't know how excited I get about that, because we already have a funding source for it, and I'd rather look at other things that we don't, but certainly that's an option. Another bucket that I would be very excited about would be for our non-for-profits. We have wonderful non-for-profits in Westfield that do amazing things that have just taken a hit repeatedly over the last year and a half, and they provide a service that we don't, and if we can support them, how much, I don't know, but if we can find a way to support them, I think that would be good. And then I know most of the cities are giving a small bonus to their public safety personnel for staying on the front lines, during what was a very trying period for our community. I'm a big fan of public safety and would love to see us, nothing significant, but maybe allocating $100,000 or $200,000 and giving everybody a small bonus for their service. And then, of course, we've talked a little bit about the YMCA. I think that does fall a little bit more under the non-for-profits. Is there a way, I don't know if our council has the will to do something out of our budget, and after, what we've looked at in the last few weeks around our budget, I don't know where we would get the money to support them. If there's a way we can get some money to them to save that project, because this will be the second time now the Y has come to Westfield, and if we can't get them to the finish line this time, I'm not sure we'll ever get them back, and I do believe that is a service, a business that would be a huge win for our community. I mean, everybody else in Hamilton County has something similar to that, and we don't. I think this is an opportunity for us to get it to the finish line. So those are some areas that I'm excited about. Doesn't necessarily mean you guys are, but that's some things that I've been looking at. And Troy, I apologize. I don't know. I think I just sent this to you, Cindy. I don't know if you sent it to Troy, but Jeremy did send Troy us a list of all projects he thinks we could pull in under this ARPA funding. Did you get that by any chance, or?
Well, I'm on my computer now, but I've been traveling, so I'm not going to be back in town until tomorrow.
We'll forward
So
it to you.
I-
Don't look too hard. We'll re-forward it just to make sure you have it. Because I only sent it to
think I
Cindy.
have it.
And it was,
I don't
it
get-
was kind of a very general email from Jeremy with very approximate information, and I don't know that it's complete. So again, if we are going to go down the road of wanting to consider these different stormwater projects and related, then we need to have, obviously much better data from Jeremy to know what is really needed, so. But we can
Yeah.
definitely look at that.
Yeah, and I don't know how you guys feel. If maybe we determine buckets that we want to give to, and then maybe look at a percent of what we want to give from our total funding. And then, especially for infrastructure, if it's 5, 6, 7 million, 1 million, then go to Jeremy and have him give us his recommendations on how that should be spent. Because I think there's going to be a lot of fluidity. We know how the process works to get a design and bid. This thing's going to play out for a while, and I'd hate to see us paralyzed to do anything because we're waiting on bids that might take a year to come back. So I don't know how you guys feel about that, but to me, that seems like a more efficient way that allows us to look at other things besides infrastructure. Now, if we decide, hey, it's all going to infrastructure, then maybe there's a different approach there, but just thoughts.
And again, we're gonna come up against this issue of things like stormwater. They do have other funding sources. And a lot of times, I think the stuff that Jeremy was saying, like we could provide the match that's necessary, or something like that. But again, we have to be careful about that because certain things are going to be not readily fundable, but even more easily fundable through standard revenue source over the course. It might take a little longer, but those things could still find funding. So that's, again, why I think we need to be careful to make sure that we're really focusing on transformational projects that really don't have other funding sources, or that we could, by, getting them this match or whatever it is, that maybe it does make sense that is transformational. Jeremy did have a comment about the downtown. And, we do have some areas that basically are suffering from incredibly old infrastructure. And, it's a bit complicated because, again, could there be funding sources through our natural, stormwater fees and stuff? Yes, but it's going to take a lot longer. And
Yeah.
will we be able to see that economic development that we want to see if we don't get that done? Penn Street being another example. There's just those considerations. So from an infrastructure standpoint, I think it's really, really something to look carefully at, but I do support infrastructure. I want to make sure that, kind of like though that we are dreaming big here, again, because this is dollars that we want to really see impact the most amount of people in the broadest way. And I know some of the other things we talked about in those partnerships, like with the Y, with the potential university and a
Health clinic,
hospital.
yeah.
And again, maximizing those dollars through partnerships too, to make certain big projects happen that otherwise might not happen if it all didn't come together, so,
I agree.
yeah.
But I do
Yeah,
like,
sorry, hey, Cindy and Scott, I think you both said this, but just to reiterate, maybe we would just set a list of the priorities, so that Jeremy's stuff comes first, then, or, Board of Public Works comes first, and, we just set that aside so that way, or whatever those priorities are.
I agree. Yep. And then one thing too, Troy, I don't know if you've got this document. Cindy just handed it to me, and I don't think I had looked at it, but, oh no, this is what I sent to you.
Yeah,
Never
yeah,
mind.
that's what you sent
I
to
got
me.
it. Troy doesn't have it. Some of the projects that Jeremy talks about is stuff that could help revitalize our downtown area, and it's not in the plan to do anything with it anytime soon. And I look at it from a standpoint of the tax revenue could be generated that would benefit all of our taxpayers with the lower tax rates. It's not sexy. Nobody will know we ever did it, but it could have a huge impact in revitalizing our downtown area, and that I think we should at least give it consideration. Some of these things I look at, I'm like, if we're looking for money to spend, we can do that, but I agree, it didn't seem to have any kind of an impact, and I'm not sure it's anything that got me excited on this one-time allotment that we've got to do something significant, so.
So, Troy, how are you feeling about the different buckets? And do you have thoughts on what you'd like to see there?
No, I like the idea of that. I'll be honest with you, I don't have a lot of thoughts on who should get what. I would agree with Scott. I mean, on the public safety, I mean, I have no problem giving the public safety, the police and fire, $1,000 or $2,000 each or something like that. I mean, that's, I think, but I'm not for, providing bonuses overall for people. I mean,
I agree.
I mean, and I don't know. I mean, that's just my thoughts. I mean, I don't want to be rude about it, but truthfully, they're the ones that were doing the work.
I totally
everybody
agree
else,
with you,
everybody
Troy.
else is at home and probably not working quite as hard because we didn't have as many events and different things. It's just not as hard. So, and then the buckets. The thing is, I don't know how much to put in each bucket. So,
I'm with you on the bonuses, Troy. I think you're dead on. And the other piece of that, too, is when we're talking about public safety personnel, I'm not talking about somebody that sat in an office. I'm talking about people that were interacting with the public and putting themselves at risk. So we're talking frontline police officers and firefighters, not administrative support, not staff, not managers or chiefs. It's the people
Totally
on the
agree.
front lines. I did ask for those numbers from both chiefs. Chief Rush has provided his numbers. It's roughly 60. I've not gotten an answer back from Chief Reed yet. But, we're not needing it right now. We're not that far down the road. But I was just trying to do some rough math in my head to see, so how much would this actually be?
Well, and again, I think if we are going to allot, 10%, for instance, to premium pay, we should know that is part of this whole set of buckets and decide if that's really something that we want to pursue. And it sounds like, although we haven't heard from anyone else on the phone, does anyone else have thoughts on that, on the premium pay? John, Carrie?
Not on the premium pay, but I would agree that I think, and I think I stated this last time, putting together a list of priorities, the projects that you feel like are, or even projects that might make the list. So we could consider premium pay a project. And then we could take the number times the number of folks times 2,000. Okay, that's the dollar amount. And then below that, we could have the stormwater project. And what's the dollar amount? And then below that, we could have the why and what's the dollar amount, and so forth and so on. So you have this list of projects that could ebb and flow, it could grow and shrink. But as we start to narrow down, because time's on our side right now, we could take some thoughtful processes into place, take some thoughtful processes into play here and actually prioritize those, and then you've indirectly created your buckets.
Okay.
taking notes.
Oh,
I'm
sorry,
keeping up with
Scott.
my meeting minutes.
Okay. John, because I already have you talking here, can you give us any estimate if we were suffering any losses in our revenue that you can attribute to the pandemic?
No, nobody in Hamilton County had that issue.
Okay. So, I mean, in terms of our proposed uses of funding, when we're looking at this table that's in our model, the provision of government services to the extent of reduction in revenue, we really just don't have that. So we can
That-
potentially look to omit this in our moving forward if we need to then.
Yeah, absolutely, we can. We could just take that section out.
Okay.
And Jake, just a question, if we do go down the path of non-for-profits, can you provide guidance or best practices how, I see that being a nightmare, a worthy nightmare, but a nightmare nonetheless on how we go about that. Do you have any ideas on that? Or?
I haven't worked with a community that's done that specifically, but yeah, I mean, yes, we've figured out sort of hairier situations than that. We've worked with one community, not in Indiana, but that did $100 million worth of assistance to households like directly, and then
Wow.
you want to talk about
my gosh.
a logistical nightmare to figure out how to yeah. But I mean, we're familiar with the interim final rule, and we're familiar with sort of the way we've gotten inside of Treasury's head to an extent to try to figure out. So if, you know, once you identify a project, we've handled a lot of different projects in terms of developing the plan and getting very clear about what the interim final rule is specific in terms of your limits and those kind of things. So, you know, if you want to do aid directly to not-for-profits, it's not off the top of my head, but if that's what we want to do, yeah, I can produce a piece of guidance explaining to you what the limits of that are going to be under the interim final rule, and then we have several colleagues who are all working on this in communities all over the state, and so if somebody has beaten you to the punch on that, I'll pull in the right colleague who has already done this,
Okay.
and if not, we'll work with you to figure out what the right strategy is. We also have good relationships with municipal advisors who are assisting sometimes with the financial pieces of this, and so you know, there's a deep network behind Barnes and Thornburg to sort of ask, you know, if we didn't do it, somebody else might have done it, and so but yes, yeah, we're happy to.
So now that the public knows we've got these funds, I've been getting bombarded for non-for-profits around this option.
Got it.
And I just told them, hey, we're not even sure we're going down that path, but something we're thinking about. Their concern is the county evidently is offering up a program as well similar to this, but they can't apply it to two different, they can't dip into both sources.
I see.
Is that correct? At least that's what I'm being told. And I'm just telling everybody, well, I can't promise you we're going down that road, so you need to apply for the one that's a guarantee. And obviously, if you don't get it, you can always apply to Westfield if we go down that path, but.
I think, and I read the minutes from the county, from their ARPA committee, and it seems like, at least from what I read, it sounded like they were telling people to go to your city first, and that would be the way to do it.
Okay,
Yeah,
that's why they're
But I know
calling
Carmel
them.
was being a bit different, and that might have been for businesses because they weren't doing what Noblesville and Fishers were. So it was different kind of setup. But I think that they are encouraging them to come to the municipality first here.
Yeah, the interim final rule, and this is just speaking at 30,000 feet, doesn't have a lot of sort of very specific regulations like that. So I don't know, but I would think that that's probably the county maybe has tried to put that rule in place for the county's funds more than there's a federal regulation that's requiring that. There are, aid to affected businesses and things. It's generally speaking, the Biden administration's sort of position, the Treasury's position, is they want as much money out as quickly as possible. So they've tried to structure their regulatory environment to allow the funds to go out as quickly as possible. So there are fixed like federal limits, and we'll guide you sort of on the regulatory path, right? But in terms of as long as like a business is not receiving something that's like grossly in excess of a reasonable amount of money, or, you know, like a reasonable, amount based on the response to the pandemic, right, then you're probably gonna be safe, even if like two municipalities were feeding into the same, not-for-profit, I would think, right, as long as, you know, this not-for-profit isn't getting just a grossly excessive amount of money for the purpose that they're serving. And, you know, and it's really gonna be, the name of the game is gonna be, is it reasonable? Is it, do you have can you explain, these were the regulations we had, and this was the reasonable answer to those regulations, and we believe that, you know, like, this is the impact from the pandemic, and this is how this relates to that, right? But in terms of knowing specifically, I think that's probably a county decision rather than the federal government decision.
Got it.
Cindy, did the county minutes show any kind of timeline for these requests for help?
I was a bit confused in reading that too, because their application actually closed. It was open and then it closed at the end of September. But then in the notes, it said it was supposed to close at the end of September of '24. So that is obviously not September of this year. So there was a discrepancy there. I'm not quite sure.
Okay, because that could help us in our direction too.
Right, and, you know, and this is just me personally, but knowing that a lot of the nonprofits that might be applying for Noblesville, quite a number of them, it seems, serve more than just the Noblesville area, and serve a lot of the county. They just happen to reside in Noblesville, at least that's what it seems. And so I don't know if the county is going to be looking or giving any preference to those nonprofits that serve multiple communities in Hamilton County. You know, I think of a place like Janus, you know, and obviously they serve, you know, Hamilton County and not just one jurisdiction or something. So I could see them applying to the county and not to Noblesville. That's just me personally. I don't know what they're doing. I would like for us to be able to focus our assistance on, you know, the biggest impact for our local residents here in Westfield, you know.
Well, to that end, Cindy, Jake, I think one of the things when you were both talking about how to disperse these funds to the local non-for-profits, maybe a scorecard, a weighted scorecard, much like we would use in an RFP, where Cindy, you've already put the number one item that would carry the most weight. How many people are you going to affect in Westfield? And the weight of that answer is higher than the weight of some of the other answers of the on the scorecard. Just a thought.
Mm-hmm. I think when we devise these applications, that's going to be a pretty important question. You know, if their service only covers, you know, 100 people, not to say that those aren't important, but if you only have $10, for instance, and you can help 1,000 versus, you know, 100 or 10, you're going to choose 1,000 probably. So.
And the other piece of that too is, you know, if you're servicing the entire county, you have lots of revenue sources to go to help cover those gaps. You know, our problem in Westfield is we got very little businesses that we can go to ask for contributions. It's going on the backs of kind-hearted people, quite frankly. And when you've got, you know, 5, 10 charities and they're all going to the dozen businesses that we have that would do something, it creates a very challenging environment. So I would prefer if we put weight around charities that focus not purely in Westfield, but primarily in Westfield. Because I think especially with, you know, all the different organizations trying to raise money right now, and there's lots of them out there, it's just a very challenging environment.
Do we have to show that they had that loss and that we can only make up those losses for them? Or are we doing things to give them resources to provide more services?
So what the interim final rule says exactly is that provision as a service, providing funds to small businesses and nonprofits should respond to the negative impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic. Recipients should consider additional criteria to target assistance to businesses in need, including small businesses. Such criteria should include financial insecurity, substantial declines in gross receipts, and comparable measures such as were used to assess eligibility for the Paycheck Protection Program. Also should be considered other economic harm due to the pandemic, as well as whether businesses have capacity to weather financial hardship. Smaller businesses, businesses with limited access to credit, and those serving disadvantaged communities should be preferenced. But the interim final rule then says recipients should consider local economic conditions and business data when establishing criteria. So, like I said, the interim final rule, it deals more in broad strokes than in specifics. So, if you have non-for-profit organizations that are responding to the economic impacts for individuals, right, in the city of Westfield, related to the pandemic, right, and they can show that, like, these funds are sort of going to be used for this work that is mitigating negative economic impacts for individuals. The city had the ability to sort of give money directly to individuals who are negatively impacted. So, and you can give money to not-for-profits. So I don't see any reason why you couldn't give money to not-for-profits to benefit sort of negatively impacted or economically impacted individuals in your community. The IFR, though, does, I mean, it sort of says non-for-profits that maybe wouldn't survive, right, or that are not doing well as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic should be considered. But it's based on your community's
So say
context.
something like, for instance, Heart and Soul Clinic, okay? And maybe they had just started offering, if I'm not mistaken, the mental health services.
Mm-hmm.
But they've seen a big increase in need here in this community and came to us and said, we'd like to expand services, but we don't have the resources to do that. I mean, is it okay for them to ask and for us to actually then say, donate to them in this way to fund resources for their mental health clinic?
I would say that sounds a lot to me like responding to the negative, to the public health impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic. The mental health sort of impacts are one of those things that's outlined in the interim final rule, and it's also if you have this organization that doesn't have the financial resources, right, it's suffering a financial hardship because it simply can't meet the need that it is trying to meet. That, yeah, I think as long as we have a justifiable reason why the organizations you've selected are meeting the public health or economic harms of the COVID-19 pandemic, that you're within the spirit of what the interim final rule is seeking. So I would think that would be acceptable, yes.
Okay. I see a lot of and the rest of the committee will have to see if they agree, but I see probably a sizable portion of our tranche here going to the nonprofit sector. Between that and the infrastructure, I realize that the premium pay is there, but that's probably a smaller subset. But right now, just looking in the general buckets in just the categories that are in section 2, for instance, of our model here, it's really like the top 3, or I'm sorry, the responding to the public health emergency, and in combination, the negative economic impacts, then the premium pay, and basically some storm infrastructure. And I mean, right now, at least that's what I'm sensing are big priorities. And please tell me if I'm wrong. Somebody on the phone there, or Scott, weigh in there.
Yeah, I 100% agree. Yeah.
Okay. So figuring out I didn't hear from anyone on the phone. Right now, I think we need to.
Hey, Cindy, this is Troy.
Yeah, Troy.
Hey, guys, if I just chime in, I'm going to piggyback a little bit on what Scott said earlier on the for-profits. And I want to be careful on the not-for-profits that it's the same way, because not-for-profits had the opportunity to get money through the PPP side as well. So, because Scott was saying, that, they probably had a tough time, bringing in money, which is probably true. I mean, but at the same time, a lot of their expenses were covered, so, which a lot of it is usually just people. I mean,
I think one of the questions that will have to be asked on the application is, have you received any other funding, and what was the nature of that? We would probably have to have the details to know if it was then appropriate for us to be considering that, to make sure it kind of wasn't a double dip, if you will.
Yep. I agree.
right. Yeah.
Yeah, we're not flush with cash in this program. So if
One
you've
of the-
gotten it from other sources, I mean, good for you, but, we need to look at new opportunities. People haven't been able to take advantage of that.
I think one of our
Yeah.
biggest challenges, though, in terms of assessing either for the applications, either for business or nonprofit, is going to also be making it not so complicated that it would be incredibly difficult and time-consuming resource-wise for them to fill out, and yet have enough information to make
Yeah.
those decisions. And I think that was
Yeah.
a challenge that they grappled with at the county in thinking about that too. So I'd be interested to know, and maybe we can talk to the county more about how that's been going for them and if they've gotten feedback on their application process.
Okay.
Yeah.
And maybe we can offer up a workshop. Hey, if you're interested in applying, 7 o'clock on Tuesday evening, we're going to give an hour workshop on how to fill out the application, the information we're going to need to see to approve a grant to your organization. And those that really want it and are serious will show up, and we'll make it as easy as we can on them. But I do believe we have to be thorough in what we're evaluating, because we want to make sure we're doing the right things with these dollars. And not all non-for-profits are created equal. So,
Okay.
do we want to set a strategy? Because I guess one thing I didn't think about, and I started getting calls from non-for-profits I didn't know existed. We all know Heart and Soul, Student Impact, Youth Assistance, the big ones we talk about routinely, but there's some little ones out there that service areas we're probably not even thinking about. Do we want to set guidelines around the kind of, non-for-profits we're looking for? Do we want to get that restrictive, or?
Well, again, I think maybe some of it comes back to what John mentioned in terms of, for the work you do, how many people does that impact? If you have a nonprofit that serves 5 people,
Yeah, that's a good point.
we need to
Yeah.
know that.
Yeah.
If it's a nonprofit we're not aware of for some reason, but that's reaching hundreds or even
Yeah.
1,000 or more, and for some reason we don't know about it, that would still be important to know.
Yeah, because I'd rather see us, I don't know how you and Troy feel, but I'd rather see us make impacts than water it down and give it to 100 different organizations. It's not really meaningful. I mean, we want to spread it out as much as we can, but we want to do something that's going to be impactful to that organization. Versus, you get
Yeah.
1,000, you get 2,000, and it doesn't really move the ball for them at all.
Yeah, that goes back to
Right.
that. Does it have ability to be transformational? I know that some of it is just keeping people afloat, but that was kind of more the way I see it as the CARES Act money. And this is going into more moving forward, and not just
Yeah.
looking back, so.
I'd like to add this though with the not-for-profits, and because we're going to head down this slippery slope. I mean, some not-for-profits are run more efficiently than others. Some not-for-profits, in our town, spend a lot of their money on eating and dining, and there are a lot of expenses that don't go to the end people, and some do. And so I'm sure there's different websites that probably are not-for-profits, but like United Way, for instance, so many dollars goes to X, or Red Cross, so many dollars goes to X. For me, that's a big deal. I mean, if and not to get into that too deep, but I think that's very important to me. I mean, it'd be like me setting up a not-for-profit, and hey, I'm just going to go out and have lunch with my buddies and do this and that and run a bunch of spend it through. But yeah, I do good things too. I'm not really thrilled about. I don't think you guys would be real thrilled about giving me any money. But you know, conversely, if I spent 98 cents of my dollars or something like that on actual things, like you said, the mental health side, or I think those are good. I'm just saying it's a slippery slope to head down, and I do like the idea of a transformational, but at the same time, there's other people who do a good job at certain things too, but I don't know.
Well, I think that we need to actually find out, I mean, in this application, what exactly they want to use the money for that they're requesting, and then have a report requirement. I mean, I don't want to make it burdensome, but you have to let us know how you spent that money, because again, we're going to be audited, and we should know how they spent that money, and that it was according to general rules that we have to follow, so.
Right.
Troy, Cindy, I would go back to my scorecard. That's item number 2, Troy, is what percentage of the dollars that you receive on an annual basis make it to the end user.
Yeah, I agree, John. I'd say that's a good one, right? I mean.
Agreed, and you could weight it more heavily, say, than some other aspect that's important to us.
Right. Yeah, I agree with that, John.
So I change gears for a minute here, because except for the one-offs of somebody contacting us, we have not had the public push yet for requests in terms of how we want to broach this. We really don't know the full need level of ask that we're going to have once we do go public and ask people if they want to apply. And so again, going back to the bucket issue, it's a bit hard to know how much to put in there when we don't know the actual need or the request there for that. And so, I feel like we do need to have some kind of public input process fairly soon to be able to even know how much to generally be looking at here. That's just me. I'm feeling uncomfortable just, because someone new to contact me or Scott or something that we know about them, but there's, plenty of people who don't know that we're doing this at all. And so getting that public process, whether it be during a council meeting, whether it be a separate event or series of events, I mean, how do you guys feel about that?
I don't disagree. And I think the city has, if I'm not mistaken, they have a list of non-for-profits, so we can probably do some direct communication to them as well. But I think, the city council meeting and, maybe have a town hall meeting about this. I don't know. I mean, I think there's a lot of ways, but I agree. We don't want somebody to not get something because they didn't realize that the program existed.
I wonder if it's of utility, before we go about that, if we do have this list of nonprofits, to, send out a general email just to get a feel and say, were you negatively impacted financially? And if so, by how much? And now that's not an application. Now it's not like we're giving you money or something, but we need to know this. We need to understand this to be able to help guide our decision making. And so maybe if there was this nonprofit list, we could at least do a bulk request just to see, just like 2 questions.
Several hundred thousand, several million, I mean, what are we talking,
Well, and that's the thing, make it a little Survey Monkey that's just a few questions.
Yeah.
That basically, were you impacted, and if so, in what category? Or just something very general, just to see.
I would think.
Cindy?
Go ahead.
Yeah.
I was just going to say, are you going to ask them then if they were, if they received money from the CARES Act or anything else at that time?
Yeah, I think you'd have to.
Well, I think we would definitely have to. But again, this is just for me assessing what is the level of need out there. Are there only 5 nonprofits who are going to actually say, yeah, we were affected and we can show it and we need help? Or yes, we want to respond and have this program because we see a new need. I don't know if that's 5 or 50, for me personally.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's really hard to know how to move forward in terms of looking at the nonprofits. And I haven't heard from this group that we're super interested in helping the business side.
I think it's too late. That ship sailed. And I don't know. Troy, I don't know how you, I think I know how you feel about it, but I don't want to assume. I own 2 businesses. We found a way to survive during COVID. I know not everybody was so lucky, but, you know, when you're in the for-profit world, you can make decisions that can change the course of your business. Non-for-profits is, you know, you're solely basing your financing model on the giving of others. And during COVID, I can only imagine how challenging that was. So I look at it differently, but that's just me. I'd love to help everybody, but when I look at all the different things we've got that we want to try to make an impact on, to me, that's the low end of the priority. Maybe we go back and, you know, we only have 500,000 for non-for-profits and we're expecting 2 million. Maybe we can come back and, you know, hit up, you know, a for-profit program, but I don't think I'd start there.
Now, we can look at things that help the economic development sector, if you will, correct, with these dollars? I mean, that was kind of general to me in terms of what the guidance said.
There is, you can provide aid to COVID-impacted industries. So I think sort of the archetypal industry under that piece of responding to the negative economic impact of the pandemic would be tourism and hospitality.
Hospitality, yeah.
So if you have like tourism and hospitality businesses here in Westfield that were particularly impacted. Well, and actually Westfield is sort of an interesting community because Grand Park is such a big draw to the region, right? So like, you know, if I know that they've my parents lived sort of just shy of Westfield, and so I'm familiar with it. Like, there wasn't a Wendy's out there in a hotel, and then suddenly one day there was a Wendy's in a hotel out there. You know, so if said hotel, right, is struggling because sports tournaments, right, were canceled for a year and a half. You know, and so that's in an affected industry, right? And you can provide aid to preserve your hospitality and tourism industries because they were particularly heavily impacted by the pandemic.
Except for most of them in our location, because Grand Park was up and functioning before most other
Yeah, in
places
July.
in the country.
Yeah.
They were impacted lesser than a lot of other businesses because they at least had traffic coming in, and we had a ton of events at Grand Park. Even those that weren't normally scheduled, they were coming in from other states. So again, I don't know that the impacts were as much as you would expect.
Well, not only that, but I mean, you're right, Cindy. I mean, they shut down from March till July, and then Grand Park started opening back up. So I think that window it's closed in terms of the need. It would have been great this time last year, maybe businesses were hanging on by a thread and couldn't get re-energized when Grand Park slowly started opening up. But we're over a year since Grand Park's opened back up. And I can tell you firsthand, you can't get in the restaurants around here. They're all booked up. So there's certainly a labor shortage, but I don't know how we address it with these funds. I mean, there's certainly patrons out there that are wanting to support the hospitality industry in Westfield. And if they've survived to this point, I would think that they've probably they're going to be fine. Again, maybe we put something together, see if there's a need. We can always do a survey like we were talking for non-for-profits. But when we think about trying not to water down all the funds that we have, what little funds we have, it's just not something I'm super excited about. And I'm very pro-business, but, you know, it is what it is.
I understand.
Troy, how do you feel about that? What's your thoughts?
Yeah, same. I mean, we were fine from a hospitality standpoint, actually, for Westfield. I mean, so I really don't see there's anything to do there, to be quite honest. I mean, yeah, we've got a lot of places coming in, so.
Anyone else on the phone have thoughts on that?
I agree with what they both said.
Okay. All right. Well, we've narrowed it down a little bit today, but I think we have more work to do.
Yeah.
I'm gonna
Cindy, how do you want to formulate a list? I mean, so that way at least we get started, putting something together. We have a framework. I mean, like I like, and like John was saying, have kind of a, like his number 2 thing is X on this, and just kind of putting together that framework of these are the top areas that we're looking to get to. Here's what we need to put together. That way we have kind of an action list,
Correct, and action items was on the agenda for today to create, and I think that we need to at least be cognizant of people's time and make sure that we have these things moving forward, so. What am I missing, Scott?
The only other thing I can think of is, we've talked about the why, and we're not confident we can even go down that road. I haven't heard you guys weigh in yet that we can certainly do that. That would have a seismic impact on this if we can't do that. It would change how we look at a lot of these other programs, I think. I don't even know if there's support in the council to support the why, but if there is, that could take a decent chunk of our money. And if we can't legally do that, it just changes, I think, the dynamic of our plan. So I would be curious to hear from you guys. Do you feel that that is a viable option for us before maybe we start to work the council and try to figure out if that's the direction we want to go?
So I don't necessarily know what particular information Jake might have had about the the specifics of the YMCA project, but you're gonna have to explain to me what exactly you're proposing to do for the YMCA. I know we had talked at the last meeting about providing money to the YMCA of Greater Indianapolis, but for what purpose? And certainly we can go back and we can write you a whole sort of report on whether or not we think that it fits within the interim final rule, but.
So we
Yeah,
talked.
go
ahead, Troy.
Hey, real quick, Scott, just correct me if I'm wrong. I remember Jake saying in the last meeting, and it kind of turned me off a little bit, is that, we would give money to the Y of Central Indiana, but quite frankly, that they didn't, we can't direct them to use it for this Westfield Y, et cetera, if I remember right. I think I remember Jake saying that, and that kind of turned me off a little bit.
I think there's 2 angles that we can go at. One would be, they are non-for-profit, and they have shown a loss, about a 30% loss. So we could go down that path, but it would have to be the Greater Indianapolis YMCA, because there is no Westfield YMCA right now. Or the other option would be that Jay could discuss, because of some of the programs they're going to be offering, and there's going to be a health clinic inside the Y, and there's some other things. We talked about the fire department as well. We could slice off things and say, these projects fit the COVID program, and we're giving money not for the YMCA, but for the health clinic that's going to be in the YMCA. And there were buckets that we could, I don't know how much that totals up to, but there was some avenues there that we could explore as well. So we just need Jake somebody to weigh in on that and tell us. And if the only option is to go through the Greater Y, then that's probably some hard conversations we're going to have.
But that was something in general that it seems our community does find as transformational for a variety of reasons. It would serve a big amount of our residents in a variety of ways that they aren't maybe receiving services now. And it's an economic development driver in a way.
Yeah, sure.
I mean, it's in our Wheeler Landing PUD, and having the additional, I don't want to say additional traffic coming that way, but it really is. I mean, Ys bring a lot of people in and a lot of opportunity, but also to go along with that, their partnerships with the different.
Marion University and
exactly, and potentially then having the ability to have a university affiliation of some level here in Westfield. So it's broader than just the Y. I mean, if people think Y and they think of gym and swim, And we're looking far beyond that, at least I know the Y is, in the request that they've had from our council for assistance in terms of the city participation. So, and it's something our residents feel is very important. The feedback that I've gotten, a lot of people really believe that that's important to the community. So it's come high on our list, and we don't know how much, if any, that we could send toward that. But it's kind of one of the things that's preventing me, I think, from going further and making any kind of determinations on these buckets is not knowing what's actually possible with the Y.
I 100% agree. I think that's the elephant in the room.
Yes.
Are we in or we out? Because if we're in, what we're talking about in terms of an allotment would take about half of our ARPA funds. So we'll have a huge impact on, not necessarily huge, because I don't know that we're going to give millions and millions of dollars to non-for-profits, but it will have an impact on how we navigate these other buckets. So I think it starts there. Is there a will? Is there a way? And if there is, start to build it out from there.
Okay. I mean, just returning to sort of the broad strokes of the interim final rule, it's responding to the COVID-19 pandemic, right? So, I will get with Jake. He's going to be back in the office this next week, and we will put together a comprehensive sort of opinion. And I'll talk with Cindy after the meeting and whoever I need to talk to get the specifics, the very specifics of the project, or as much as you have, so that we can get a more comprehensive sort of answer on what of it is going to
So
fit.
I'm
within-
happy to provide that, but I will tell you that Jake has that because we had a meeting with the YMCA staff, with the county, with Jake. Several people were in that room to try to figure out how we could get the Y to finish it because the county's looking at possibly coming in with some money as well. So I know we've had that, he's got it all, but I'm more than happy to sit down with you if we need to. And
No, I can circle with Jake, and I apologize that we didn't come prepared for that.
No.
That was,
He's a tad bit tied up
I
right
gotta
now.
say, yeah, he's a little, every time I talk to him, you can tell that he has not slept.
I told him ahead of time to get sleep.
Yeah, so that's, I apologize, but I will get with Jake and talk that through with him, and that's good that he's sort of, that you've had those meetings, and so that'll give us a comprehensive ability to sort of answer that. And I apologize that I didn't come to this meeting with that answer.
No worries, no worries.
So let me just put it out there. And we have this model guidance, obviously, and it's got little things that are estimated costs and, your action responding. And would everyone be okay if I kind of filled out some of these as a very rough draft and everyone can comment on whatever I put in there? I'll just throw some numbers out there and you let me know what you think. But we'll work
That
on
sounds
the.
great.
You're okay with that?
Yeah, that sounds awesome to me.
Troy, you don't want to take the lead on that, Troy?
No, just volunteer. I would say I'm going to second and third that motion.
I couldn't hear what you said, but I'm guessing maybe
I
I
think
don't
Troy
want
made
to.
a motion for you to take the lead on
I
that.
said,
And I'll
I said
second
I'll
that
second
motion.
and third
so.
it, that Cynthia's going to take the charge on that. That's
Just so
awesome.
we're clear, I'm doing this very generally and with the idea that everyone's going to comment and hopefully make changes or tell me I'm completely wrong or whatever it is. Before we get into the action items that I'd really like to make sure that we cover, there was a change in guidance and reporting, at least the reporting requirements, because originally we would have had to have a report in by the end of October, and now that is changed to March, or I think it's due in April 1st maybe of 2022, our first project report. I saw that come out from AIM, and so that made me feel better because I don't know that we have enough to even put in a report. So we don't have to worry about that right now, from what I understand.
Correct. Well, and just as a general rule, as we go along, that you have until 2024 to encumber the funds, and so even if the reporting had been in October and our report was. We did receive the money from the Treasury, and we're figuring it out. That would have been okay. And even if in April, I don't imagine in April that we're gonna be at a place where we're still figuring it out, but, you know, that you have until 2024 to sort of pledge the funds to something, and then till 2026 to spend them. So, the reporting requirements. I think the federal government realized that everybody needed a minute to kind of figure out what they were going to do with it, and they didn't necessarily. They were like, well, we could get a bunch of room, because Westfield is not the only community that is figuring this out, right? Every non-entitlement government, you know, every metropolitan city, every county in the nation is having this exact conversation, and all of them are panicking about, you know, who do we give it to and what can we give it to, and I think probably an attorney at every law firm in America is answering these exact questions. So, yeah, yes, but I wouldn't panic about the reporting, even if we don't have much to say in our report, because they give us lots of time, and I think that there is a dawning realization that, sorry to everybody on the phone, that this is going to be a process to figure out how to spend this money. And we're also, I mean, the interim final rule is still an interim final rule, right? So we are yet even to receive technically the final regulations, which we anticipate will probably be a step back on the rigidity of some of the things that they were rigid on. We don't anticipate it getting more strict, right? So things may free up yet still, right? And so there's that to look forward to, and I think a lot of communities are probably maybe even waiting on that before they start making decisions. I know that the federal government's preference is that you just spend it all right now. They're very pro spend it right now, but you're not the only community that's navigating an interim final rule that is full of phrases that you're like, well, that could mean one thing, or this guy could mean another thing, and we're all doing this. So we can go forward with knowing like that you know we're safe, and we have lots of time to figure this all out.
Well, that is good. Very helpful. And let's go into these action items. So I will actually put some numbers of some semblance into these sections from that model, just to see where we stand, and we'll then be able to discuss those at the next committee meeting, if that makes sense to everybody. Hopefully we'll have some more information, again, on the stuff from the Y. I will find out if we can do this nonprofit survey, just to get the very basic information. And what else do we need for that next meeting?
And maybe we attach it to what you just said, but do we want to get a list of all the non-for-profits that the city has on record? I think there's a list out there like that. Chris, give me that blank stare. Not really your purview, is it? So I'll check. If you want, I can check with, it's whatever, but we probably tie those two together, maybe check.
The chamber might have one as well. We can reach out to them.
Oh, yeah, good point. Well, why don't you reach out to the city, and I'll reach out to the chamber and see if we can find a list that we can send that to once we develop it.
Okay. And we'll do that, and then hopefully develop this little survey that we could send out. And give us, hopefully that'll guide that discussion of numbers better too, if
Yeah,
we
I think
do
I'll pare
have
it down
that.
quite a bit.
And maybe even in the interim, we can work with Jeremy to define those projects. And he did not talk to John or John Nail or Wes Rude about any other things that they had going on in there that might make sense too over in Public Works. So just something that we should probably look into more fully to understand everything that they might request or that we would want to consider. So in that bucket anyway.
I don't mind reaching out to Jeremy if you want,
Okay.
and maybe have him prioritize it, and then maybe just put a little bit more meat on the bones for us to consider.
Yes, I think that would be handy. And I don't know that we're at the level yet to create this application yet, are we, do you think?
Soliciting nonprofits
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know that that's an interim, an ARPA question, but,
Yeah.
but it's you know, you might want to decide on your criteria based on the interim final rule.
Oh, yeah, right, we were gonna talk to county. I will talk to the county about their experiences in their application.
And I'm happy to confer with my colleagues who are working with other communities and figure out if anybody else is doing nonprofit grants and what criteria they're using, and to provide what if anything, other communities that we're working with have decided on, so.
Okay. Well, that will be helpful.
And then if you want, Cindy, I'm halfway there already. If you want, I can follow up with Chief Reed and just get those numbers we were talking about, public safety personnel. I've got the numbers from Chief Rush, I just never got it from Chief Reed.
Yes, please
And that way we
do.
have a total number of how many people this applied to, and then we can start doing some math that in.
Okay. Sorry, I'm writing too, just to make sure I don't forget. So I think we have our action items for the next meeting. Am I missing anything? I don't think so. I want to thank everybody for their time today.
Productive.
Very much, thank you. And our next meeting is October 22nd, and hopefully we'll have the information we talked about today and having it ready for that meeting. And if you guys wouldn't mind, if we could schedule some meetings for the rest of the year even, I was thinking it might be more appropriate to move to just once a month for November and December. I mean, we could be doing work on the side, but we start getting into those holidays and people get crazy. So if everyone's okay moving to once a month for November and December, I'd like to do that. Any thoughts?
Agreed.
Sounds good.
Okay, can we consider November 19th and December 17th?
Are those off weeks of our council meetings or the same week?
It is off week.
Yeah, that'd be good. Wait, what were the dates again?
November 19th and then December 17th.
Okay, November 19th, I will be deep in the woods in Minnesota and I will not be reachable. So
Okay, well, let's
I
look
would
at the
ask
week. What about
kindly if we could push that.
we'd probably need to do the week before to keep it on a Friday if you wanted to.
And I could do that week, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, I just fly out Thursday. So if you still want to hold that week, if you guys can push it to another day, I'm fine.
Troy or anyone else on the phone have thoughts on that?
I'm pretty open, so.
December 7th or November 17th would work, right? That would be before you fly out.
I feel more comfortable with the 16th if we could.
Wait, November or December? Which one are you talking about?
November, which is a Tuesday.
November 16th. How's that looking for others?
Sounds good.
2
good.
o'clock?
Okay.
2 o'clock on the 16th. But then going to December, are we okay with moving that back to Friday? Or do you guys like doing another day?
I'm indifferent. This is Troy.
Yeah,
I couldn't hear.
he said he's indifferent.
Oh, he's indifferent?
I'm indifferent as well. As long as I get an advance notice, I can get a plan around it.
Okay, let's keep it Friday, the December 17th then.
Perfect.
You said 16th or 17th, I'm sorry?
17th, Friday, December
2
17th.
o'clock, okay.
Yeah. And I think we're good then. I am working with Chris, and I owe him some items about just getting some basic information up on our city's website and contact information so we can be receiving communication from the public. about any of this. Also, basically just a tab, if you will, to have all things ARPA related. And so everything that we approve and, link to guidance and all those things, we can hopefully have that at some point all in one area. So that's being worked on. If anyone has any ideas about that, let me know. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved?
I'll second that. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor? I guess we have to do.
Aye.
We can do it by voice, I think.
Oh, we can do it by voice on this one. Okay, all those in favor? Aye.
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 Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, Cindy.